The morning fog clung to the Montana mountains like a shroud, and Duke was acting like he'd caught the scent of ghosts. Marcus Reed stood on his cabin porch, coffee steaming in the cold air, watching his German Shepherd pace with an urgency that made his veteran instincts prickle with unease. For 3 years, Duke had been the perfect companion, calm, disciplined, content to share the silence that Marcus had traveled 2,000 miles to find. Until this morning, when something in the mist had awakened memories that lived deeper than training. "Easy, boy," Marcus said, but Duke's attention was fixed on the tree line with the intensity of a soldier who'd spotted movement in hostile territory. At 58, Marcus carried the weight of 32 years in the Army like a stone in his chest. The lines around his gray eyes spoke of places he'd rather forget. Desert compounds where good men died for classified reasons. Mountain passes where the enemy wore no uniform. Operations that existed only in files locked away in Pentagon basements. He'd come to Montana, seeking what every warrior eventually craves. Silence loud enough to drown out the voices of the dead. Duke whined, a sound that cut through the morning stillness like a blade. The dog's massive frame trembled with barely contained energy. His amber eyes locked on something Marcus couldn't see through the fog. "What is it, Duke?" Marcus asked, setting down his coffee. "What's got you spooked?" The German Shepherd's response was to bolt toward the forest with a bark that echoed off the mountains. Not the playful bark of a dog chasing rabbits, but the urgent warning cry of an animal who'd found something that shouldn't exist. Marcus felt his chest tighten with the familiar weight of adrenaline. 3 years of peaceful mornings, and now this. The kind of behavior that in another time, another place, had meant the difference between completing a mission and coming home in a box. He grabbed his jacket and followed Duke into the mist, trusting instincts that had kept him alive through conflicts the history books would never record. The Montana wilderness swallowed them whole, ancient pines rising like cathedral pillars toward a sky that couldn't decide between gray and white. Marcus moved with the silent precision of a man who'd learned to walk through hostile territory without leaving a trace. But Duke was making enough noise for both of them. The dog crashed through underbrush with single-minded determination, following a scent trail that existed only in his enhanced senses. Marcus recognized the behavior. Duke was tracking something specific, something that triggered responses buried deeper than normal canine instincts. "Duke, heel," Marcus called, but the command fell on deaf ears. They climbed through terrain that would challenge experienced hikers, Duke leading them up steep slopes covered in loose shale and patches of early snow. The fog grew thicker as they gained elevation, creating a world of shadows and whispers where sound carried strangely and distances became meaningless. Marcus's breath came in white puffs as they crested a ridge he'd never explored in 3 years of living here. The isolation had been part of the appeal. Thousands of acres of wilderness where a man could disappear completely, where the past couldn't follow across mountain ranges and time zones. But the past, Marcus was learning, had its own ways of finding you. Duke stopped suddenly at the base of a massive granite outcropping, his body going rigid with the kind of alertness Marcus associated with explosive detection work. The dog began pawing at what looked like solid rock and fallen leaves, whining with increasing urgency. "What V you found, boy?" Marcus asked, kneeling beside his agitated companion. At first, he saw nothing but the natural debris of a mountain forest, pine needles, weathered stone, the brown carpet of decades' worth of fallen leaves. But as Duke's claws scraped away the organic camouflage, something artificial began to emerge. Metal, rusted and weathered, but unmistakably man-made. Marcus's hand shook as he helped clear away the accumulated debris of years. What they revealed made his blood run cold with recognition and impossible memory. A door. Steel, painted olive drab, bearing stenciled numbers and symbols that Marcus knew from a lifetime of military service. But these weren't just any military markings. They were specific codes he'd seen before, in places that officially didn't exist. during operations that had never been declassified. Project Cold Harbor, authorized personnel only, 1962. The date hit Marcus like a physical blow. 1962, the height of the Cold War, when paranoia and nuclear fear had driven both superpowers to desperate measures. The year before Marcus was born, when men in gray suits made decisions that would echo through generations. Duke whined again, pawing at the heavy steel door as if he understood its significance. The dog's behavior suggested more than simple curiosity. It was recognition, as if some buried memory had led him to this exact spot. Marcus examined the door's surface, noting details that made his veteran instincts scream danger. The steel was thick, designed to withstand both weather and more violent forms of intrusion. The locking mechanism was complex, multiple deadbolts, and what looked like an electronic system that had probably been cutting-edge technology 60 years ago. But what made Marcus's hands tremble was the small notation etched near the bottom of the door, SGT. M. Reed 1st Special Forces, Kia 1963. Reed, his family name, carved into steel in a place that shouldn't exist, associated with a father he'd never known. Marcus had been told his father died in a training accident at Fort Bragg when Marcus was 6 months old. A routine exercise that went wrong, classified details, a closed-casket funeral, and a Purple Heart that had sat on his mother's mantle until the day she died. But this door, hidden in the Montana wilderness, told a different story. Duke's barking became more insistent, and Marcus realized the dog wasn't just alerting to the door's presence. He was trying to communicate something urgent about what lay beyond it. Marcus found the handle, a heavy lever that required significant force to operate. The mechanism groaned with decades of disuse, but it moved. The seals around the door frame were still intact, suggesting that whatever lay beyond had been protected from the elements for 60 years. "Duke," Marcus said quietly, "I think we're about to open something that was meant to stay closed." The German shepherd's response was to stand beside him, alert and ready for whatever they might find in the darkness beyond. Marcus took a deep breath of the cold Montana air, knowing that once he opened this door, his quiet retirement would be over forever. Some secrets, once uncovered, changed everything. But the name on the door was his legacy, and Duke's instincts had never been wrong. Marcus pulled the lever, and the door swung open with a groan that seemed to carry the weight of 60 years of buried history. Beyond the threshold lay darkness that smelled of stale air and secrets. And somewhere in that darkness, the truth about his father's death was waiting. The underground facility stretched into darkness like the throat of some mechanical beast, and Duke's low growl suggested they weren't the first to disturb its silence. Marcus played his flashlight beam across walls lined with riveted steel plates, the kind of construction he'd seen in Cold War bunkers from Berlin to Korea. The air carried the metallic taste of old secrets and the faint chemical odor of preservation systems that had been running longer than most people had been alive. Duke moved ahead with the cautious precision of a working dog, his nose processing information that human senses couldn't detect. The German shepherd's body language had shifted from excited discovery to professional alertness. Whatever lay deeper in the facility, it commanded respect. "Easy, boy," Marcus whispered, but his own voice sounded hollow in the steel-walled corridor. Emergency lighting flickered to life as they descended, motion sensors triggering systems that had waited decades for activation. The sudden illumination revealed a facility far more extensive than Marcus had imagined, branching corridors, heavy blast doors, and warning signs in multiple languages that spoke of dangers, both nuclear and biological. But it was the photographs lining the walls that made Marcus's chest tighten with recognition and impossible grief. Dozens of black and white portraits, each bearing a name, rank, and the stark notation, Kia, Project Cold Harbor. Young faces in military uniforms, men who had volunteered for something that had cost them their lives. And there, third from the left in the top row, was a face that Marcus recognized from his mother's photo albums. Sergeant Michael Reed, 1st Special Forces Group, his father. Duke whined softly, pressing against Marcus's leg in a gesture of comfort that suggested the dog understood the emotional weight of the discovery. Marcus studied his father's photograph with trembling hands, seeing his own features reflected in a man who had died when the world was younger and the stakes of the Cold War demanded sacrifices that children would never know about. The facility's deeper levels revealed a laboratory complex that belonged in a science fiction nightmare. Examination tables, monitoring equipment, and containment chambers that spoke of experiments conducted in the name of national security. But it was the control room that held the answers Marcus had been seeking his entire life. Banks of computers, primitive by modern standards but revolutionary for 1962, hummed with patient electricity. File cabinets lined the walls, their contents organized with military precision. And at the center of it all, a desk bearing a nameplate that made Marcus's hand shake. Dr. Elena Vasquez, project director. Duke's behavior changed as they entered the control room. The dog began the same urgent pawing that had led them to the hidden door. But now he was focused on a specific file cabinet marked with biohazard symbols. "What is it, Duke?" Marcus asked, following the dog's lead. The files Duke had located contained personnel records for every soldier who had participated in Project Cold Harbor. Marcus found his father's file quickly, and what he read made his blood run cold with understanding and rage. Project Cold Harbor, classified subject, enhanced combat capabilities methodology, experimental neurological enhancement status, terminated, high mortality rate. His father hadn't died in a training accident. He had volunteered for an experimental program designed to enhance human combat capabilities through neurological modification, the same kind of research that, decades later, would lead to treatments for PTSD and traumatic brain injury. But in 1962, the science had been crude, dangerous, and ultimately fatal. Duke's continued investigation led them to something even more disturbing: a breeding program designed to create military working dogs with enhanced capabilities. Dogs whose neurological systems had been modified to create supernatural loyalty, intelligence, and the ability to detect threats that normal animals couldn't sense. The program had been shut down after the human experiments failed, but not before several enhanced dogs had been bred and trained. According to the files, the surviving animals had been relocated to civilian families, their true nature hidden to protect the classified research. Marcus looked at Duke with new understanding. The dog's uncanny ability to detect danger, his supernatural loyalty, his intelligence that bordered on human. It wasn't just exceptional training. Duke was the descendant of the Cold Harbor dogs, carrying genetic modifications that had been designed to create the perfect military companion. "Is that why you led me here, boy?" Marcus asked. "Some kind of genetic memory?" Duke's response was to move to another section of the control room, where he began pawing at what appeared to be a solid wall. Marcus's investigation revealed a hidden panel that opened to reveal something that changed everything. A cryogenic storage chamber, still active after 60 years, containing biological samples labeled with his father's name and military identification number. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. His father's enhanced neurological tissue had been preserved, studied, potentially used for research that continued long after Project Cold Harbor was officially terminated. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. Security monitors throughout the facility suddenly activated, displaying real-time footage of vehicles approaching the hidden entrance above ground. Black SUVs with government plates, moving with the coordinated precision of a federal task force. Someone knew they were here. Duke's growl deepened as the sound of helicopter rotors echoed through the facility's ventilation system. The dog's enhanced senses were picking up threats that Marcus couldn't yet detect, but his military experience told him they had minutes at most before the facility was surrounded. "Duke," Marcus said grimly, I think we just walked into something that people are still willing to kill to protect. The German shepherd's response was to lead Marcus to another hidden panel, this one revealing an emergency exit that had been concealed for 6 decades. But as they prepared to escape, Marcus realized he couldn't leave without the truth about his father's death and the continuation of research that had cost so many lives. He grabbed the personnel files and his father's biological samples, evidence that could expose a government conspiracy spanning multiple generations. Outside, the sound of vehicles and aircraft grew louder. Whoever was coming, they had resources and authority that suggested Project Cold Harbor had never really ended. It had just gone deeper underground. Duke led Marcus through the emergency exit into a maintenance tunnel that stretched toward daylight and freedom. But as they ran through the darkness, Marcus understood that his quiet retirement was over forever. Some secrets were too dangerous to leave buried, and some mysteries demanded justice, even if it took 60 years to find it. Duke's enhanced instincts had led them to the truth about Project Cold Harbor. Now they would have to fight to survive long enough to tell it. The emergency tunnel spat them out into a ravine 3 miles from the hidden facility, where Duke's enhanced senses were screaming warnings about the hunters closing in around them. Marcus pressed his back against the granite wall of the ravine, listening to the sound of helicopters circling overhead like mechanical vultures. The file folder containing his father's records felt like it weighed 100 pounds in his hands, evidence of a conspiracy that had murdered good soldiers and hidden the truth for 60 years. Duke crouched beside him, the German shepherd's body language radiating the controlled tension of a predator preparing to fight. The dog's breathing was steady, but his amber eyes tracked every sound, every movement in the forest above them. "How many, boy?" Marcus whispered. Duke's response was a series of soft growls, 2 short, 3 long, that Marcus recognized as the tactical communication they developed during their years together. 5 hostile contacts, moving in coordinated search patterns. Marcus felt the familiar weight of combat settling over him like an old coat. 3 years of peaceful retirement had ended the moment Duke led him to that steel door, and now they were back in the world of hunters and prey, of classified missions and expendable soldiers. The documents in his hands told a story that powerful people had spent decades trying to bury. Project Cold Harbor hadn't been an isolated experiment. It was part of a larger program that continued to this day, hidden behind layers of classification and military bureaucracy. Enhanced soldiers, modified animals, genetic research that pushed the boundaries of human capability and moral acceptability. His father had been murdered for volunteering to serve his country, and Duke was the living descendant of experiments that treated animals like laboratory equipment. Marcus's satellite phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number he didn't recognize. Against every instinct, he answered. "Sergeant Major Reed," a calm voice said. "My name is Director Sarah Chun, Defense Intelligence Agency. We need to talk." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "How did you get this number?" "The same way we've been monitoring Project Cold Harbor for the past 15 years. Your father's research was never abandoned, Sergeant Major. It was absorbed into programs that are still active today." Duke's warning growl made Marcus look up at the rim of the ravine, where armed figures in tactical gear were beginning to appear. Professional soldiers, moving with the discipline of special operations personnel. "Director Chun," Marcus said, "I'm currently being hunted by people who seem very interested in keeping Cold Harbor classified." "Those aren't my people," Chun replied grimly. "They represent a faction within the military-industrial complex that has been using Cold Harbor research for unauthorized experiments. Your discovery of the facility threatens billions of dollars in black-budget programs." The sound of boots on rock told Marcus that time was running out. Duke was positioning himself for fighting withdrawal, his body language indicating multiple threats approaching from different directions. "What do you want from me?" Marcus asked. Your father's files contain evidence that could expose the people responsible for corrupting his research. But we need you alive to testify about what you found. Marcus looked at Duke, whose enhanced genetics had made him the perfect partner for this impossible situation. The dog was reading tactical information from sources Marcus couldn't access, processing threat assessments with supernatural precision. Director Chen, Marcus said, if you want those files, you'd better send help fast. Already en route. Can you hold your position for 10 minutes? Marcus watched armed figures rappelling down the sides of the ravine, their movements coordinated and professional. These weren't government agents conducting a routine investigation. They were eliminators, sent to ensure that Project Cold Harbor's secrets died with him. I'll do my best, Marcus replied, ending the call. Duke's tactical assessment was clear from his positioning. They were outnumbered but not outmatched. The dog's enhanced capabilities gave them advantages that normal military working dogs couldn't provide, and Marcus's 32 years of combat experience had prepared him for exactly this kind of situation. The first shots came from above, suppressed weapons firing with the precision of professional marksmen. Marcus rolled behind a boulder while Duke sprinted toward the nearest rappelling soldier with lethal intent. What followed was unlike any combat Marcus had experienced in 3 decades of military service. Duke moved through the attacking force like a supernatural predator, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge automatic weapons fire while closing with targets who couldn't believe what they were seeing. The dog's attack patterns were too complex, too coordinated, too intelligent for a normal animal. Marcus provided covering fire, while Duke dismantled the tactical assault with combinations of speed, intelligence, and genetically enhanced capability. The attacking soldiers were elite operators, but they'd been briefed for a mission against a retired veteran and his pet dog. They weren't prepared for a modified combat animal whose capabilities exceeded human parameters. The battle lasted 8 minutes and ended with 5 enemy soldiers neutralized and Marcus still holding the evidence that could change military history. Duke returned to his side, breathing hard but uninjured, his amber eyes bright with the satisfaction of a mission completed successfully. Good boy, Marcus said, scratching behind the dog's ears. Your father would be proud. The sound of approaching helicopters told Marcus that reinforcements were arriving, but Duke's relaxed posture suggested these were friendly forces. The aircraft that descended into the ravine bore DIA markings and disgorged a team of federal agents led by a woman in her 40s, whose bearings suggested both intelligence work and military background. Sergeant Major Reed, she said, approaching with her hands visible. I'm Director Chen. Thank you for staying alive long enough for us to get here. Marcus looked at the federal agents, at Duke, whose genetic heritage connected him to 60 years of classified research, and at the files that contained evidence of his father's murder. Director Chen, Marcus said, I want to know exactly how deep this conspiracy goes, and I want justice for every soldier who died because of Cold Harbor. Chen's expression was grim but determined. Sergeant Major, what you've discovered is going to require a congressional investigation, FBI oversight, and probably a complete restructuring of how we conduct classified research. Duke barked once, a sound of approval that suggested he understood the magnitude of what they'd accomplished. Marcus looked up at the Montana sky, where the last of the hostile helicopters was disappearing over the mountains. His quiet retirement was over, but for the first time in 3 years, he felt like he had a mission worth fighting for. His father's death would finally have meaning. Duke's genetic legacy would be used to expose the truth rather than hide it, and the soldiers who had died for Project Cold Harbor would finally receive the justice they deserved. The DIA safe house in Billings looked like a suburban office building, but the basement contained technology that could decrypt 60 years of classified documents and genetic research. Marcus sat beside Duke in a room filled with computer screens and federal investigators. watching as his father's files began to reveal a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military command. 2 weeks had passed since their escape from the Cold Harbor facility, and each new piece of evidence painted a picture of corruption that made Marcus's stomach turn. Project Cold Harbor was just the beginning, Director Chin explained, scrolling through files that showed decades of unauthorized research. Your father's neurological enhancement studies were absorbed into at least 12 different black budget programs, all operating without congressional oversight. Marcus studied surveillance photographs showing meetings between Pentagon officials and executives from biotechnology companies he'd never heard of. The faces were older now, but some he recognized from his own military service. Officers he'd respected, men whose orders he'd followed without question. Duke lay at Marcus's feet, but the German shepherd's attention was focused on something the humans couldn't see. The dog's enhanced senses were processing information from sources that existed beyond normal perception, and his body language suggested growing unease. "What's bothering him?" Chin asked, noting Duke's alert posture. "He's detecting something," Marcus replied. "Duke's genetics allow him to sense things that normal dogs can't. If he's concerned, we should be concerned." Chin's expression darkened. The people behind Cold Harbor have resources we're still discovering. If Duke is picking up surveillance or tracking devices. Duke's sudden movement to the window confirmed Marcus's fears. The dog began the pawing behavior that had led them to the hidden facility. But now he was focused on something outside the safe house. Marcus joined Duke at the window and felt his blood run cold. Across the street, parked with tactical precision, were 3 black sedans with government plates. The occupants weren't making any effort to hide their surveillance. "Chun," Marcus said, "we've been found." Director Chin moved to her communication console, coordinating with federal protection teams, while Marcus studied the vehicles outside. The men in those cars weren't DIA agents or FBI investigators. Their positioning and equipment suggested military special operations. "How did they track us here?" Chin asked. Marcus looked at Duke, whose enhanced genetics might include capabilities they hadn't discovered yet. "It's possible they're tracking Duke's genetic signature. If Cold Harbor research continued, they might have developed technology specifically designed to locate the enhanced animals." Duke's growl deepened as more vehicles appeared on surrounding streets. Whatever was coming, it was coordinated and overwhelming, the kind of operation that suggested unlimited resources and official authorization. Chen's secure phone rang with an incoming call that made her face go pale. "This is Director Chen." "Yes, sir. I understand." "No, sir, that's not acceptable." She ended the call and looked at Marcus with an expression of barely controlled anger. "That was the Secretary of Defense. I've been ordered to turn over all Cold Harbor materials and cease our investigation immediately." Marcus felt the familiar weight of betrayal settling in his chest. "The conspiracy reaches that high." "Higher," Jim replied grimly. "According to my contact at the Pentagon, the order came from the Joint Chiefs of Staff themselves." Duke's barking exploded through the safe house. Not a warning this time, but an alarm. The dog had detected immediate danger that required instant action. Through the windows, Marcus could see armed figures emerging from the surveillance vehicles, their movements coordinated with military precision. These weren't federal agents conducting an investigation. They were elimination teams, sent to ensure that Cold Harbor's secrets died with everyone who had discovered them. "Chun," Marcus said, grabbing the files containing his father's research, "is there a way out of here that doesn't involve the front door?" "Emergency exit through the parking garage," she replied, already moving toward the stairwell. "But Marcus, even if we escape, where can we go? If the Pentagon is compromised, there's nowhere safe." Duke's response was to lead them toward a section of the building that Marcus hadn't explored. The dog's enhanced intelligence was guiding them to something that human analysis had missed. a route of escape that existed beyond normal perception. As they descended toward the parking garage, Marcus realized that Duke's genetic modifications included more than enhanced senses and intelligence. The dog seemed to possess an intuitive understanding of human behavior and tactical situations that bordered on precognition. They reached the garage just as the first explosion rocked the building above them. The elimination teams weren't bothering with subtlety. They were using military-grade explosives to destroy evidence along with witnesses. Chen's vehicle was a reinforced SUV designed for exactly this kind of emergency extraction. As they sped out of the garage, Marcus could see the safe house burning behind them. Federal agents scattering as government-sanctioned soldiers turned American soil into a battlefield. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked. "The only place where Cold Harbor evidence might be safe." Chen replied. "Senator Patricia Williams chairs the Senate Intelligence Committee, and she's been investigating unauthorized military research for 2 years. Duke's barking from the back seat drew Marcus's attention to the side mirrors. They were being followed by the same black sedans, but now there were also helicopters joining the pursuit. "Chun," Marcus said, "they're not planning to let us reach Senator Williams." The high-speed chase through Montana's mountain highways became a running battle between federal agents trying to protect whistleblowers and military forces operating under orders that came from the highest levels of government. Marcus found himself returning fire at American soldiers, while Duke's enhanced senses guided Chun through evasive maneuvers that saved their lives repeatedly. The dog's genetic modifications were allowing him to predict their pursuers' tactics with supernatural accuracy. But the most disturbing revelation came when Chen's secure radio crackled with transmissions from the attacking forces. The voices giving orders were using code names and protocols that Marcus recognized from his own classified service. "Those are Delta Force operators," Marcus said grimly. "Elite soldiers who believe they're conducting a legitimate national security mission." "What kind of mission?" Chen asked, taking evasive action as another helicopter appeared overhead. Marcus listened to the radio chatter, his blood running cold as he recognized the tactical language being used. "They've been told we're terrorists who stole classified weapons research. They think they're saving American lives by eliminating us." Duke's howl echoed through the vehicle, a sound of grief and rage that seemed to carry the weight of 60 years of betrayal. The dog understood that they were being hunted by the same military they had served, that loyalty and patriotism had been twisted into weapons against truth and justice. As they approached the coordinates where Senator Williams was waiting, Marcus realized that Cold Harbor's conspiracy had evolved into something far more dangerous than unauthorized research. It had become a shadow government within the military, capable of turning America's own defenders against its citizens. Duke's genetic legacy was the key to exposing the truth. But first, they had to survive long enough to deliver it. Senator Patricia Williams operated out of a fortified ranch in the Glacier National Park area, where congressional immunity and federal protection created a sanctuary that even shadow military operations couldn't breach directly. Marcus stood in the senator's war room, watching Duke interact with security systems that seemed to recognize the dog's enhanced genetics. The German Shepherd behavior had become increasingly sophisticated since leaving the Cold Harbor facility, as if proximity to the research had awakened dormant capabilities. "The genetic modifications in Duke's bloodline are more extensive than we initially understood," Senator Williams explained, reviewing classified documents that made Marcus's hand shake. "Your father's neurological research was combined with animal enhancement programs to create something unprecedented." Marcus studied brain scans showing Duke's neural activity, patterns that exceeded normal canine parameters by orders of magnitude. "What exactly are we looking at?" "Telepathic communication capabilities," Williams replied. "The ability to sense human intentions, predict tactical situations, and process information at superhuman speeds. Duke isn't just an enhanced dog. He's a living weapon designed to interface with human consciousness. Duke's response was to move to a computer terminal and begin interacting with it, using a combination of pause and what appeared to be direct neural interface. The screens displayed information that Marcus couldn't access through normal channels, classified files about current military operations involving enhanced soldiers and animals. How is he doing that? Director Chen asked. The Cold Harbor researchers embedded quantum processing capabilities into the enhanced animal's neural structures, Williams explained. Duke can literally interface with electronic systems through electromagnetic field manipulation. The information Duke was accessing made Marcus feel sick with understanding. Cold Harbor hadn't ended in 1963. It had evolved into a massive program involving thousands of enhanced soldiers and animals, all operating under the control of military officers who had perverted his father's research into tools of oppression. Senator, Marcus said, how many people know about the current scope of the program? Williams's expression was grim. Fewer than a dozen. The enhanced soldiers are told they're participating in experimental medical treatments for combat trauma. They have no idea they're being turned into programmable weapons. Duke's continued interaction with the computer revealed something even more disturbing. Real-time tracking data showing the locations of enhanced soldiers throughout the world, all receiving orders through encrypted channels that bypassed normal military command structures. They're planning something, Marcus said, studying the deployment patterns. These positions look like preparation for coordinated operations. Williams nodded grimly. According to our intelligence, the Shadow program is preparing to implement what they call Final Protocol, the use of enhanced soldiers to eliminate government officials who threaten their operations. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. They're planning a coup. Not a traditional coup, Williams corrected. They're planning to eliminate congressional oversight, judicial review, and executive authority over military operations. They want to create a permanent military state using soldiers who can't refuse orders. Duke's barking drew their attention to new information appearing on the computer screens. The dog had accessed communication intercepts showing that the elimination teams pursuing them were part of a larger operation targeting multiple government officials simultaneously. Senator, Director Chen said urgently, you're on their target list. Williams's response was to activate security protocols that transformed her ranch into a fortress. I've been expecting this for months. The question is whether we can expose the conspiracy before they eliminate everyone who knows about it. Marcus looked at Duke, whose enhanced capabilities represented both the key to stopping the Shadow program and the evidence of its existence. What do we need to do? Duke's neural interface capabilities allow him to access the central command systems controlling the enhanced soldiers, Williams explained. If he can reach the quantum servers housing their control protocols, he might be able to reverse the modifications. Duke's response was a sound that wasn't quite a bark, something that seemed to carry complex information about the technical challenges they faced. The dog understood the mission and its risks better than any human in the room. Where are these servers located? Marcus asked. Williams pulled up a map showing a facility that made Marcus's blood run cold. The Cheyenne Mountain Complex, NORAD headquarters, buried under 2,000 feet of granite and protected by the most sophisticated security systems in the world. That's impossible, Chen said. Even with congressional authority, we can't penetrate NORAD without triggering a national security incident. Duke's response was to return to the computer terminal and display something that changed everything. Architectural blueprints showing service tunnels and maintenance passages that connected to the original Cold Harbor facility. The mountain complex was built on top of the original research site, Marcus realized. Duke's genetic memory includes knowledge of passages that predate NORAD by decades. Williams studied the blueprints with growing excitement. If we can reach the quantum servers through the old facility, we might be able to stop final protocol before it's implemented. But Marcus was studying intelligence reports showing the scope of the forces arrayed against them. Senator, even if we reach the servers, we'll be going up against enhanced soldiers whose capabilities exceed normal human parameters. That's where Duke's unique abilities become crucial, Williams replied. His neural interface doesn't just allow him to access computer systems. It allows him to communicate directly with other enhanced animals and potentially override the control protocols in enhanced soldiers. Duke barked once, a sound of determination and readiness. The dog understood that he was the key to stopping a conspiracy that had perverted his genetic legacy into tools of oppression. Marcus felt the familiar weight of mission responsibility settling over him. When do we leave? Tonight, Williams replied. Final protocol is scheduled to activate in 72 hours. If we don't stop it, the United States government as we know it will cease to exist. Duke moved to Marcus's side, pressing against his leg in a gesture of absolute trust and partnership. The dog's enhanced genetics had led them to the truth about Cold Harbor, and now those same capabilities would determine whether democracy itself survived the conspiracy born from his father's research. Marcus looked at the German shepherd whose loyalty had already changed the course of military history. Ready for one more mission, boy? Duke's response was a bark that seemed to carry the weight of 60 years of buried secrets and the promise of justice finally served. The battle for the soul of American democracy was about to begin, and everything depended on the loyalty between a soldier and his genetically enhanced partner. The abandoned Cold Harbor tunnel system stretched beneath Cheyenne Mountain like the nervous system of some ancient creature, and Duke's enhanced senses were screaming warnings about the darkness ahead. Marcus crawled through passages that hadn't seen human presence in 60 years, following Duke's genetically programmed knowledge of routes that connected the original research facility to the NORAD complex above. The air carried the metallic taste of old secrets and the electromagnetic hum of quantum computers processing data that could control human minds. How much further? Director Chin whispered from behind him. Duke's response was a soft whine that Marcus interpreted as both proximity warning and danger alert. They were close to their target, but the enhanced soldiers guarding the quantum servers would detect their approach soon. 50 meters, Marcus replied, studying the tunnel map that Duke's neural interface had downloaded from memory banks buried in his DNA. But Chun, once we reach the server room, we're committed. No way out except through. Senator Williams's voice crackled through their secure communications. Marcus, our intelligence shows final protocol activation has been moved up to 1800 hours. You have less than 2 hours to reach those servers. The urgency in her voice reflected the scope of what they were trying to prevent. Enhanced soldiers were already moving into position around Washington, D.C., their modified minds programmed to eliminate congressional leaders, Supreme Court justices, and executive branch officials who threatened the shadow military's control. Duke suddenly froze, his body going rigid with the alertness Marcus associated with immediate combat threats. The dog's enhanced hearing had detected something in the tunnel system ahead, movement that suggested they were no longer alone. Contact front, Marcus whispered, drawing his sidearm. The figure that emerged from the darkness wasn't what Marcus expected. Instead of an enhanced soldier, they faced a woman in her 70s, wearing a laboratory coat and carrying equipment that seemed decades ahead of current technology. Sergeant Major Reed, she said calmly. I've been waiting for you. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I was the original director of Project Cold Harbor. Marcus felt his world tilt sideways. According to the files, you died in 1963. According to the files, your father died in a training accident, Vasquez replied. The Cold Harbor conspiracy has been very good at manufacturing convenient deaths. Duke's reaction to Vasquez was immediate and complex. The dog moved toward her with recognition, but his body language suggested conflicted emotions, trust mixed with wariness, as if genetic memory carried both positive and negative associations. "You knew my father," Marcus said. "I killed your father." Vasquez replied with devastating honesty. "The neurological modifications were my design. The genetic research was my responsibility. Every soldier who died in Cold Harbor died because of my work." The admission hit Marcus like a physical blow, but Vasquez continued before he could respond. "I've spent 60 years trying to undo the damage, trying to stop the people who corrupted my research into tools of control and oppression. Your father volunteered to save lives, but his death created monsters." Duke's enhanced intelligence seemed to process the emotional complexity of the situation. The dog moved between Marcus and Vasquez, not as a barrier but as a bridge, his behavior suggesting that understanding was more important than revenge. "The quantum servers controlling the enhanced soldiers are protected by security systems I designed," Vasquez continued. "Without my access codes, you can't reach them. Without Duke's neural interface capabilities, you can't override them." Marcus studied the elderly scientist, whose work had shaped his entire life. "What do you want from me?" "Forgiveness," Vasquez replied simply, "and the chance to make amends for 60 years of watching my research be used to betray the soldiers I meant to protect." Duke's response was to approach Vasquez and place his paw on her hand, a gesture of acceptance that carried the weight of genetic memory and inherited understanding. "The enhanced soldiers guarding the server room don't know they're puppets," Vasquez explained as they moved deeper into the tunnel system. "Their minds have been modified to eliminate doubt, question, or resistance to orders. They'll die before allowing us to reach the quantum computers." Marcus felt the familiar weight of combat preparation, but this would be unlike any battle he'd fought in 32 years of military service. "How do we get past soldiers who can't be reasoned with or intimidated?" "Duke's neural interface can communicate directly with their enhanced brains," Vasquez replied. "If he can establish contact, he might be able to override their control protocols temporarily." The tunnel opened into a vast chamber that had been carved from the mountain's granite heart. Quantum computers lined the walls, their processing cores humming with the power to control human consciousness on a massive scale. And standing guard throughout the chamber were 12 enhanced soldiers, whose modified minds made them perfect weapons. Marcus studied their positions and equipment, noting details that made his veteran instincts scream danger. These weren't just soldiers. They were living weapons whose capabilities exceeded normal human parameters by orders of magnitude. "Duke," Marcus said quietly, "can you reach them?" The German shepherd's response was to close his eyes and enter a state that Marcus had never seen before. Duke's enhanced neural interface was establishing connections with the enhanced soldiers' modified brains, creating a network of consciousness that transcended individual minds. What happened next defied every assumption Marcus held about the nature of loyalty and free will. One by one, the enhanced soldiers began to remember who they had been before the modifications. Their programmed obedience cracked as suppressed memories surfaced. Families they'd forgotten, oaths they'd sworn, principles they believed in before their minds were turned into tools of oppression. "My God," Vasquez breathed, watching her life's work being redeemed by the loyalty between a soldier and his dog. Duke isn't just accessing their control protocols. He's restoring their humanity. But the process was taking a terrible toll on Duke. The dog's body trembled with the effort of maintaining neural contact with 12 enhanced minds simultaneously, and Marcus could see that the strain was pushing him beyond safe limits. "Duke, that's enough," Marcus said, moving to support his partner. But Duke's response was to intensify his efforts, knowing that this was the moment that would determine whether his genetic legacy served freedom or tyranny. The enhanced soldiers' awakening created chaos in the quantum computer systems. As their programmed obedience dissolved, the control protocols began to collapse, sending error cascades through the network that controlled enhanced operatives worldwide. Marcus, Senator Williams's voice crackled through their communications. We're seeing massive system failures in the enhanced soldier network. Whatever Duke is doing, it's working. But the victory came at a price that made Marcus's heart break. Duke collapsed from the neural strain, his enhanced consciousness having burned itself out in the effort to free his fellow victims of Cold Harbor research. Marcus knelt beside his partner, feeling for a pulse that was growing weaker by the second. "Stay with me, boy. We did it. We stopped them." Duke's amber eyes looked up at Marcus one final time, and in them Marcus saw not just the loyalty of a faithful companion, but the satisfaction of a soldier who had completed his final mission. The German shepherd's last breath carried the weight of genetic memory, inherited purpose, and love that transcended the modifications that had shaped his existence. Duke had saved not just the enhanced soldiers, but democracy itself, and Marcus Reed finally understood the true meaning of his father's sacrifice. The silence in the quantum server chamber was broken only by the sound of systems powering down and the soft weeping of enhanced soldiers, remembering their stolen lives. Marcus knelt beside Duke's still form, his hands trembling as he stroked the German shepherd's fur that had grown cold in the mountain air. The dog's sacrifice had freed minds that had been enslaved for years. But the price of that freedom was a loyalty that had burned itself out in service to others. Dr. Vasquez approached slowly, her aged face bearing the weight of 60 years of guilt finally lifted. "He knew," she said softly. Duke understood that breaking the neural network would require more power than his enhanced brain could safely channel. Around them, the 12 enhanced soldiers were experiencing the return of memories that had been suppressed by quantum programming. Men and women who had been turned into weapons were remembering their families, their principles, their reasons for serving their country. "Sergeant Major Reed," one of them said, approaching with tears streaming down his face. "I remember you now. You served with my father in Afghanistan. Captain David Rodriguez, 3rd Battalion Rangers." Marcus looked up from Duke's body to see a young man whose enhanced modifications were gradually shutting down as the control network collapsed. "David Rodriguez? I knew your father. He was a good soldier." "He was murdered by the same people who stole my mind," Rodriguez replied. "The enhanced soldier program targets children of military families who ask too many questions about classified operations." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. The shadow military hadn't just been creating weapons. They'd been eliminating bloodlines that might threaten their control, turning the children of murdered soldiers into tools of oppression. Director Chen's voice crackled through their communications. "Marcus, we're monitoring massive failures in enhanced soldier operations worldwide. Whatever Duke did, it's creating a cascade effect through the entire network." But Marcus's attention was focused on something else. Duke's neural interface collar was still active, its quantum processors continuing to transmit even after the dog's death. "Vasquez," Marcus said urgently, "Duke's collar is still connected to the network. What's it doing?" The elderly scientist examined the device with growing amazement. He embedded his own neural patterns into the quantum system before he died. Duke is continuing to override control protocols even after his consciousness has transferred to the computer network. Marcus felt his chest tighten with understanding. Duke hadn't just sacrificed his life. He'd given his consciousness to ensure that no enhanced soldier could ever be enslaved again. Senator Williams's voice came through their secure channel. "Marcus, I'm receiving reports that enhanced soldiers worldwide are breaking free from their programming. Military units in 12 countries are reporting that their enhanced operatives are remembering their original identities. But the liberation came with chaos. Enhanced soldiers who remembered their stolen lives were turning against their handlers, seeking revenge for years of mental slavery. The shadow military's control structure was collapsing as their weapons became their enemies. "We need to get out of here," Rodriguez said, monitoring communications from the NORAD facility above them. "Security forces are mobilizing to contain the breach. They'll seal the mountain rather than let this information reach the public." Marcus looked around the server chamber, where his father's research had been perverted into tools of tyranny, and his dog's loyalty had transformed it back into instruments of freedom. Duke's sacrifice had meaning, but only if they could survive to tell the world what had happened. "Vasquez," Marcus said, "is there another way out?" "The original emergency evacuation route leads to a facility in Denver," she replied. "But Marcus, you should know that Duke's neural interface contained more than just override protocols." She connected her equipment to the quantum computers, revealing files that Duke had downloaded during his connection to the network. Video recordings, financial records, communication intercepts, evidence of every crime committed by the shadow military over 6 decades. Duke copied their entire database, Marcus said in amazement. Every operation, every murdered soldier, every corrupted official. The German shepherd's final gift was complete documentation of the conspiracy that had cost so many lives, evidence that would ensure justice for his father and every other victim of Cold Harbor research. As they prepared to evacuate through the emergency tunnels, Marcus took one last look at Duke's body. The dog's enhanced genetics had led them to the truth. His loyalty had saved democracy, and his sacrifice had ensured that the shadow military could never again turn soldiers into slaves. "Rodriguez," Marcus said to the young soldier, whose mind Duke had freed, "will you help me carry him out?" "It would be an honor, Sergeant Major." They moved through evacuation tunnels toward freedom, carrying Duke's body and the evidence that would reshape American military history. Behind them, the quantum servers continued processing Duke's neural patterns, ensuring that enhanced soldiers worldwide would retain their freedom. Senator Williams met them at the Denver facility with FBI agents, congressional investigators, and media representatives who would carry the story to the American people. The Cold Harbor conspiracy was finally exposed, but the cost had been measured in lives that could never be recovered. Marcus stood before the assembled investigators, Duke's collar in his hands, and began to tell the story of a genetic legacy that had started with his father's sacrifice and ended with his dog's redemption. "My father volunteered for Project Cold Harbor because he believed his service could save American lives," Marcus said. "His research was perverted into tools of oppression, but his genetic legacy lived on in a dog whose loyalty ultimately saved our democracy." Duke's neural patterns, embedded in quantum computers worldwide, would ensure that no soldier's mind could ever again be enslaved by those who claimed to serve their country. The German shepherd's consciousness had become a guardian angel for every enhanced soldier, a digital ghost that would protect the freedom his genetics had been designed to defend. Marcus looked at the collar that contained his partner's final gift to the world, and he could swear he felt Duke's presence still watching over them all. Some loyalties transcend death, some partnerships echo through eternity, and some dogs become legends that protect the innocent long after their bodies return to the earth. 3 months after Duke's sacrifice exposed the Cold Harbor conspiracy, Marcus Reed stood in Arlington National Cemetery, where heroes sleep beneath white stones that stretch endlessly toward horizons they died protecting. The headstone before him bore 2 names now: Sergeant Michael Reed and Duke, partners separated by 60 years, but united in their service to truth and freedom. The inscription below their names read simply, "Loyalty beyond death, service beyond self." Marcus placed a wreath of Montana wildflowers at the base of the stone, flowers from the mountains where Duke had first led him to the buried secrets that changed everything. The German shepherd's neural interface collar rested beside the wreath, its quantum processors long since integrated into systems that protected enhanced soldiers worldwide. The congressional hearings concluded yesterday, Senator Williams said. approaching across the hallowed ground with steps that carried the weight of justice finally served. 47 military officers indicted, 12 defense contractors under federal investigation, and complete restructuring of all classified research programs. Marcus nodded, but his attention remained focused on the headstone that represented more than individual sacrifice. Duke's genetic legacy had exposed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government, but more importantly, it had proven that loyalty and love could triumph over the most sophisticated forms of oppression. How many enhanced soldiers have been freed? Marcus asked. All of them. Williams replied with satisfaction. Duke's neural patterns continue to monitor and protect every modified soldier worldwide. His consciousness has become a digital guardian that prevents any attempt to reimpose mental control. The implications still amazed Marcus. Duke's final act hadn't just been sacrifice. It had been transformation into something greater than physical existence. The dog's enhanced consciousness now lived in quantum computers across the globe, ensuring that no soldier's mind could ever again be enslaved. Director Chin joined them at the gravesite, carrying files that contained the final pieces of the Cold Harbor puzzle. The enhanced soldiers who were freed are being offered full medical treatment and psychological support, she reported. Many of them are choosing to continue military service, but now with their minds truly their own. Marcus thought about Rodriguez and the other soldiers whose stolen memories Duke had restored. They'd become advocates for military ethics reform, using their experiences to ensure that classified research would never again be conducted without proper oversight and voluntary consent. What about Dr. Vasquez? Marcus asked. Full immunity in exchange for her testimony, Chin replied. She's working with the CDC to develop treatments for soldiers suffering from experimental modifications. Her goal is to heal the damage her research created. The morning sun painted Arlington's landscape in shades of gold and remembrance, creating shadows that seemed to hold the spirits of all who had served with honor. Marcus felt Duke's presence in those shadows, not as a ghost, but as a living force that continued to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. A young soldier approached the gravesite, moving with the careful precision of someone still adjusting to freedom after years of mental control. Marcus recognized him as Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, one of the enhanced soldiers Duke had liberated. Sergeant Major Reed, Torres said, saluting with genuine respect rather than programmed obedience. I wanted to thank you and Duke for giving me back my life. Marcus returned the salute, seeing in Torres's eyes the clarity that came from remembering one's true purpose. What will you do now, Sergeant? I'm working with Senator Williams to establish a foundation for soldiers who've been victims of unauthorized research, Torres replied. We're calling it the Duke Foundation, dedicated to protecting military personnel from exploitation disguised as service. The name brought tears to Marcus's eyes. Duke's legacy would live on not just in quantum computers, but in institutions dedicated to the principles he died defending. Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from the Montana ranch, where he'd returned to live after the congressional hearings. The caretaker reported that a stray German shepherd had appeared on the property, a young dog with unusual intelligence and markings that reminded everyone of Duke. It seems your partner may have left you one final gift, Senator Williams said, reading the message over Marcus's shoulder. Marcus smiled, understanding that Duke's genetic line would continue, that somewhere in the wilderness he called home, puppies might be growing up with enhanced capabilities dedicated to protecting rather than controlling. As they prepared to leave Arlington, Marcus placed his hand on Duke's headstone one final time. The granite was warm from the morning sun, but Marcus felt something more, a sense of presence that suggested love and loyalty could indeed transcend death. Duke, he said quietly, your mission is complete. Every enhanced soldier is free, every conspiracy exposed, every wrong made right. You can rest now. But even as he spoke the words, Marcus knew that Duke would never truly rest. The dog's consciousness lived on in quantum networks that spanned the globe, a digital guardian angel watching over soldiers who served with honor. That evening, Marcus sat on his cabin porch in Montana, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of fire and peace. Beside him lay Duke's collar, its quantum processors humming with activity as they continued their eternal mission of protection. A young German shepherd emerged from the forest, moving with intelligence that reminded Marcus of another dog who had changed the world through loyalty and sacrifice. The puppy approached cautiously, then settled beside Marcus with the confidence of an animal who understood its purpose. Marcus scratched behind the young dog's ears, feeling the circle beginning anew. "Well, boy," he said, "I suppose you're here for a reason too." The puppy's response was a soft bark that seemed to carry echoes of Duke's voice, a sound of greeting, recognition, and the promise that some bonds are stronger than death, some loyalties endure beyond time, and some love echoes through generations. In the distance, the Montana mountains stood eternal and watching, guardians of secrets now revealed and protectors of freedom earned through sacrifice. Marcus Reed had found his father's truth, exposed a conspiracy that threatened democracy, and learned that loyalty was the most powerful force in the universe. Duke's legacy would live forever in the soldiers he'd saved, the freedom he'd protected, and the love he'd proven could conquer even death itself. Some partnerships transcend mortality. Some dogs become angels. And some stories never really end. They just transform into new chapters of hope, courage, and the eternal bond between those who serve and those who love them without condition.